Hi, friends. Welcome to Embracing Your Season. I'm your host, Paige Clingenpeel. We are so excited that you're joining us today. Today, we have a very fun conversation, one that I have recently experienced that I think would benefit parents to learn more about. We're going to be talking about short term mission trips for youth. Maybe you experienced one growing up. I know that I did, and it was transformational. And so I wanted my kids to experience it as well. But we do know that there are pros and cons to short term missions experience, making sure that we are doing what Jesus has called us to do. So I am not having this conversation by myself. In fact, I am inviting my producer, Mike Sergovia, on the show with me as well to continue this conversation to hopefully bring wisdom and encouragement as you consider some options for your kiddos to experience missions trips. So, Mike, thanks so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Paige, it's so good to see you. You're probably a little bit tired because I know you just got back
Sure
a few
am.
days ago. So make sure you get that Coke Zero in your veins
That's right.
so you can
That's
function.
right.
So you Paige, you just got back and so how was it?
Mm.
Was it
Oh, gosh.
amazing? Tell me.
It was. So, our church partners with an organization called Solid Rock International, and this is in the Dominican Republic. And this organization has been around for, I think, around 50 years. They emphasize on the heart, body, soul, and mind of the people of the DR and serving the poor. And so, they have just an amazing opportunity for us in America to partner alongside local leaders in the medical field, in construction, and in education. And so we just have this a beautiful way of taking people and integrating them into the culture, but learning from the people of the DR. But what is so cool is that I was able to bring my kids down with me. So last
Mm,
year I brought my oldest daughter.
yeah.
This year brought both my daughters, which was such a fun experience. And it really was life changing for them. And so I know that there's benefits in that, but I just want to make sure that we have that conversation that we really just need to be sober minded when we talk about entering another culture and what our motivation is. So I'm curious, have you ever done a missions trip before, Mike?
Okay, well, I actually haven't done like a formal one, but my friends and I when we were younger, we kind of made one up.
Okay. How do you just make up a
Oh,
missions
okay, we were we were like it was a Friday night, I think we're at Denny's or something like that, and we just had some time of fellowship and prayer, and I said, "Guys, I'm just really feeling led to go down to Tijuana, Mexico." At the time, we were living in Anaheim, California, and they said, "Let's. What do you mean? What?" And I said, "Let's just go down there. We'll get some blankets, we'll get some tracks in Spanish, and let's just go walk around and buy food and just see how we can care for the people of Tijuana." They go,
Wow.
"Let's go." So we piled in my 1972 Volkswagen Bug, and right, and we drove down to Mexico. We didn't have a ton of money, but it seems like the Lord gave us enough. And we got some blankets and some tracks, and we bought some like fruit, and we just gave it out. And we were just open, and some just cool things happened. And we did that, for a short weekend. Um, and it was amazing. I think we're like 19 at the time, so it kind of
Oh,
goes
man.
along with what you're saying, Paige, as far as like your heart, you know,
Yeah.
to want to be able to do that, and how the youth need to do it. And that's why I was just thinking about your daughters. How wonderful of an opportunity that they both got to go with you this time,
Yeah.
because I know last year your oldest went with you. So, man, how cool! How cool was it for
Yeah.
them?
Yeah, yeah, it is, and what a fascinating story of you just feeling like the
Mhm.
spirit move and just being like, "Hey, we should go do this." And I
Yeah.
love that it just happened in the moment and you were able to
Yes.
actually meet the needs, which truly that's what missions is all about. It is
Mm.
meeting the needs, in this case of the poor, in the
Yeah.
DR. It's meeting the needs of the poor in a medical way, an educational way, as well as building facilities like churches. And so I love that you did that. I mean, if my kid came to me and said, "Hey, I'm gonna go to Tijuana and hand out blankets and fruit and tracks," I'd be like, let's maybe reconsider." But I love that you're like, "I just listened and I did it and God provided." Like, how cool of a story is that?
Yeah, absolutely. He did provide. It was pretty amazing. So, Paige, how did it come about to where um, your daughters wanted to come with you like last year, and then this year both of them came?
Yeah.
So how did that? Did you prompt them? Did they ask? What's the scoop there? What's the story?
Yeah. That's a good question. So I know for me, I went on a missions trip when I was in high school and I went with my mom. It was a medical missions trip. It was in Belize. And I think the experience to me was really altering because I was able to see a different culture, see how other people live. But what was so beautiful is that we did the evangelism of that, and just the heart of the people down in Belize that loved Jesus, the way that they worship, they were super passionate about it. It just opens your eyes that we all serve the same God, just in different cultural contexts, and we're all one body, brothers and sisters. It's just so beautiful. And so I wanted my kids to have that experience as well. And knowing that my church, Pine Hills, partners with this organization and they've done it for years, I felt very secure in knowing this is well organized. They have the right heart mission. And I really felt like I could bring my children along and to have this experience. And so taking Haley, just one child with me at the time,
Mhm.
again, was so good. And she was one of, I think, maybe 3 teens, 2
Mhm.
teens that went that year. This year, we took up to 8 teenagers, high school
Wow.
students. One actually was a middle school student, and what was so phenomenal about this kid is I think he's in 7th grade. He worked the construction site the whole time, and the night before, he felt God put on his heart. He wanted to evangelize to those that worked on the construction site because in this case, we're partnering with local organizations. So Solid Rock is the management of the construction sites, but they hire local workers. So they
Mhm.
don't know all Jesus at this point. So Liam is his name. And Liam was like, man, I really feel like I should tell them about Jesus, but I don't know how to do that. And so he had a great conversation with his mom. They brought Spanish Bibles the next day, and the kid spoke to 5 different people of the DR on that construction site who came to know Jesus just because he initiated a conversation with them. Like, how cool is that? That even our kids can evangelize in that way. And so that was kind of the experience I wanted for my kids, and bringing the youth alongside is how can we partner with them
Mm.
to use their gifts to bring them out into this place where they might be out of their comfort zones, but really just focus on Jesus and serving him in tangible ways to the people around the world. And so that's kind of how it happened. And of course, my daughter initially was like, yeah, let's skip a week of school. I'm all about this, right? And then she realized what she'd be doing, which
Mm.
is working with the kids, while the families were waiting for the medical providers. And she has a heart for kids. She wants to be an
Oh.
elementary age teacher. And so last year, she brought a tennis ball, and so they were able to play catch.
Oh.
The little girls love their fingernails painted, and so she did that. And again, this year, both my daughters were able to do that. And it's just those small moments where you see them serving in those little ways of building relationship, and they don't know the language, like they don't know Spanish, but they still connected. And my hope is that not only it changed my child's life, but it also showed the love of Jesus for these people that we were providing to their medical needs and physical needs and other needs across the board. So yeah, just such a cool thing. And my plan is to bring my son next year, so that we're hopefully going to make this like a family thing in the future as well, which again is just so cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, to the parents out there who are starting to think
Mhm.
about, a short-term mission trip through the church or whatever it may be, uh, what do you think are some expectations, some of these conversations they can start having, with their kids, if they're going with them? Um, what are some things they could start thinking about or to expect as they
Yeah.
prepare, for a short-term mission trip?
Yeah, well, I definitely believe that there needs to be a big conversation of the expectations of the reason why we do this, and hopefully their youth leader has done this a few times so they can have those front end conversations. But I think we have to be very clear that we are not there as a voyeur. We're not there to
Mm,
just vacation and experience and then go back and just say, "Oh man, we just have it so much better."
mm,
We have to have the heart posture of, yes, we're gaining a lot from this experience, but we're also doing it because Jesus told us to serve. Jesus told us to bring the gospel to the world, but he also told us to be the hands and feet and to serve the orphans, to serve the widows, and to serve the poor. We do that in tangible ways. And so helping our kids understand that, yes, this is a fun experience. Yes, we get to go to another country, but the reason behind it is all for ministry. And having that expectation then sets the groundwork to receive. what you can learn. Because I think so often we go on these experiences and we go in with egocentrism, like America first, America has the best ways, America can save the world. No, the reality is that you can learn a lot from other cultures.
Mm,
Take the DR. The people of the DR are so friendly and outgoing and generous. I'm telling you, like they on the evangelism portions that we would take out into, they call them the barrios. So the
mm,
medical providers come once a month and they provide medical resources, prescriptions, vitamins, hygiene packets. So while the clinicians are doing that, we get to either play with the kiddos or we get to walk around the neighborhood with a local pastor where we can plug these people in. On these excursions, I had a hard time at first. I was like, I don't want these people to feel like we're just looking at their life and judging their life. But what the Pastor Noel told me is that these individuals will never open up their doors to a pastor just walking up and down the street. But he will, or they will open the doors when they see Americans because they want the Americans to come in. They want to serve the Americans. Like this time we had sugarcane. I've never had sugarcane. It
mm,
was literally in this woman's backyard. And she's like, I would love to serve you in this way. The amount of hospitality these people have, we can learn from. The way that they love and the way that they have community, we can learn from.
mm.
Americans are so individualistic. We're actually called by God to be community oriented. The DR represents that. And so I think those are some of the things that we got to recognize is that we got to put our cultural context away and say, how can I learn? How can I grow from seeing how other people live and love Jesus as well?
Yeah, right. To totally like serve the Lord, that the Lord would give you the heart, his heart,
Mm.
like to serve.
Mhm.
Because I could see that. I've heard even on some other people I know that've gone on these mission trips, Paige, and then they actually get down because they
Mm.
see such a poverty level that it's a
Yeah.
struggle for them to serve on the trip. They kind of lose focus. So I really like what you
Yeah.
said. Maybe have those expectations ahead of time. This is what you're going to see, but
Yep.
we're not there just to look and whatever and try and compare. We're there to serve and see what the
Yeah,
Lord, how he wants to
and let me
use us.
speak to that,
Yeah,
the
please.
poverty experience,
You please.
because, yeah, that was new for my kids. Again, I have traveled a lot, doing a lot of missions too. I've seen poverty, even in the United States, I've seen it. It's a different level in another country. They don't have the same clean water. They don't have the sewer system that we have. So it is a different level in another country, but we you cannot help but be changed by seeing how other people live. And when you see the fact that they live in this place that we've referred to as poverty, that should change our lives. That should change our perspectives. Our kids can walk away with the perspective of the wastefulness that we have here in the United States. In the DR, they are so resourceful. They use everything
Mm,
and they have minimal amount of trash when they have meals because they share the same bin of food. They use the utensils that they have and they're just so well resourced in that regard that there is no waste. And that's something that we can appreciate here in the United States. And I'm always reminded of it might be a proverb or it might be a real story from my undergrad experience. Uh, I was in intercultural studies, and my professor told us that as his time in Africa, that he heard from a pastor who went to a village. And so the pastor said, I am praying for you in your poverty. This is what he said to the local pastor in the African village. And the African village pastor said, I'm praying for you in your prosperity. I mean, that changed. That was a huge paradigm shift for me because, especially in Western countries, we are so well resourced that we rely on ourselves, that we don't have to rely on God to provide our daily bread, that we don't have to rely on God to provide to our needs, our physical needs, because they're so easily accessible in the United States. And so their reliance on the Lord is completely different than ours because of their experience. And it was just one of those things where now my kids saw the tangible ways that these individuals have to rely on the Lord in such a deeper way due to the fact of the place that they live in this poverty. And so it is a real thing, and we can grieve for them, but we can also recognize that because of that, that's built resilience and character and hope in the relationship with the Lord in ways that maybe we'll never experience because we don't have the same challenges they potentially do.
Now, I know that this trip was huge for you, and I know how excited
Mhm.
you were in telling me about it before you even went. So, why is it important for our listeners to know? I mean, while we're even talking about this page, why
Yeah.
should they go on a short-term mission trip with their kids if they can? Why is this such a thing for you?
Yeah, so I think when I'm thinking through some pros of sending kids on short-term missions opportunities, I would say first learning a different cultural context. When we are stuck, even in our own city, like I know that I live what would probably be considered it's the second largest city in Indiana. So I mean it's still bigger, but Indiana is very different than New York City, than Boston, than LA, right? So even just like traveling to a different city changes the culture, changes the values. And so going to a totally different country, again, what a mind-opening experience. Because we're so limited in our context, we put God in a box as well. When we look at the bigger world, look how huge it is. Look at God's creation. That can't help but change our minds about how big God really is. And so, having that exposure, I think number one is a huge pro of sending your kids into this place. I think, and I mentioned this earlier, another thing is just worshiping the same God, but in a different context, reminding us that we are not the only ones that know Jesus, nor are we the only ones that need to be preached about Jesus. There are so many people, whether it's our neighbors or someone in another country, that need to know the saving grace of the Lord. For instance, in the case of the DR, the country, their belief system is Catholic with a mix of voodoo, so some witchcraft in there. So they have some distorted beliefs about Jesus. And so when you ask them, do you believe in Jesus? They'll say, oh, yeah. But when you say, is Jesus your Lord and Savior? That's when they're like, well, I mean, he's kind of a part of it, but so is Mary, and so is
Mm,
this, and so is, and so then they
mhm.
start getting into this distorted view washed down from their elders who have taught them these are the beliefs. So helping our kids understand that people may proclaim Jesus but not truly know them, that's a lesson that they can learn here and even in the United States, which is valuable. I think another thing that really is valuable, a pro for mission trips for our kids, is just that bonded experience with their peers and their youth leaders. When we share experiences, there is something that is transformational about them. It leads us closer into relationships with others. But if these are fellow disciples of Jesus, these become our go to people. So now we have this experience where we've bonded with them in a deeper way that now in the future, when we have a struggle or a challenge, we know we feel comfortable going back to them. And so that can build up real relationships, which is really awesome. And then finally, I love the idea of people really finding out through challenges who they are, who God is, as well as like how they can be used in a really powerful way. So my girls, for instance, they have this natural inclination to serve with the kids, but what they also found is that they have this ability to really connect with people, even adults, even without knowing the language. Like laughter transcends culture, and so my daughters had this ability to really connect with others through body language and through just doing interactive types of speaking experiences without even knowing the language. That helped them understand and build confidence in themselves as well as the future possibilities, which are endless because communication isn't just speaking, it's also the body language, and building relationships don't always come supernaturally, but this is a practice to continue to be take initiative so that you can build relationships even across cultural.
Right. Now, what about some of the cons? Do you talk to
Yeah.
the kids about some of those? What are some of the cons of a
Yeah.
short terms like mission trip?
So
Besides,
I would
you losing all of this sleep.
Ah, yes, and might I mention spiders? Hello, there are huge spiders across the world,
Oh,
and
yeah.
a funny story about that. So I was doing the construction the first day, and we were, messing with rebar, but
Mhm.
I thought it was called rebarb. Anybody else out there? My husband is in construction, and I'm telling you what, when I was sharing my story later that day, everyone was like, "Did you say rebarb?" I was like, Yeah, isn't that it? Oh, I got razzed hard. Anyway, so we're fixing rebar so we can make this church, whatever. And all of a sudden, someone over in the corner was like, "Ooh." And I was like, What's that mean?" I'm already on hyper alert because I know there's spiders down here. And they're like, "Come here and look at this." This thing was the size of my
Oh
hand.
my gosh.
It was ugly. It was brown. It was probably a brown recluse, let's be honest,
Yeah.
and it could have shot poison right into my mouth and I could have died. Like, I got real close to death, guys. So, the I know Spanish. I know a little bit of Spanish. I'm not huge. Yo hablo un poquito, right?
Right.
Um, but I do know ayúdame, which means help me, help me, help me. So I'm yelling out ayúdame, ayúdame, and then these guys like, surround me in the rebarb and we take care of it. But I mean, ooh, that's a con.
That's a
Okay.
big
Can we put
con.
that at number one?
Yes.
The dangerous spiders that are in the world. Okay.
Yes.
So there's one.
Okay.
I think the other thing is we just want to be careful of the ideology of America is the savior,
Mm,
right? Like
mm,
we have this idea. I think it's a national idea. I think it's been on the stage a lot within, the last 10 years. America first, like we can provide all this guidance and wisdom. Now, do I think America does things efficiently? 100%. Do I think we can do things super well? Absolutely. But when we enter another cultural context, we have to have respect and honor the way that other people do things. Even if we know construction site, for instance, even if OSHA would show up and they would shut it down because they're using like 2x4s to hold up like concrete walls, like we get it. We can see that there's a problem here. But if we come in with a mentality that we know what's best and we shut down the way that they do it, we're taking away the dignity and the honor of the people there. And I just don't want kids to develop that mentality, seeing it from adults, it's going to trickle down that they go in saying, well, the Americans are here to save the day. We obviously know what we're doing and we're doing it the best. No, I
mm,
think we have to shut that mentality down and say, we can learn so much from other people and we should honor and respect them and just allow that opportunity for teaching, So I
mhm,
think that's one of the biggest cons that comes to mind. And that's not just for kids, that's, pretty much adults as well. I think another con potentially is, and this actually goes into my previous one about America coming and saving the day, is that it's now created in some populations that have been served by missionaries and the Americans consistently is this learned helplessness.
mm,
So we have this in the United States. We have this in conjunction with poverty that people have learned that their needs will be supplied if they continue to have a dysfunction in a certain way, that they'll get these handouts, right? The problem is that it doesn't set people up for success to learn how to succeed on their own. And so now we're just bringing food and clothing and hygiene and medicine and fixing construction problems without teaching them how to do it on their own. It's biblical. God designed us so that we can master our environment. So we work hard, we plow the soil, we put seeds in, we water, and it flourishes, right? We're designed for that work. If we don't allow the people uh, to have the dignity to work for what they're getting, it takes away their self-sufficiency, but also it impacts their identity and their worth. So I feel like it's really important that when we go in, we partner with them. We don't tell them how to do it. We don't tell them we do it better than them. And we don't supply to all the needs. Instead, we say, how can we partner and come alongside? And that's where it's really important to partner with good organizations. Because if they are doing it right, then you'll see the longevity of the health of the organization. Like Solid Rock, for instance.
yeah,
Again, 50 years. They have built an entire hospital now to serve the poor so that they can have surgeries, they can deliver babies, they can get medications that are needed. But it's the local Dominicans that are staffing these places. We're just coming in, during the summertime or in February, like once a week, where we can be like, how can we just assist? How can we partner alongside? So making sure that you're sending your kids in an organization that partners with local leaders instead of making it all your own.
so, Paige, what would you say to the parents that are listening that might say, I've thought about going on a short-term mission trip, with my husband or even taking the
Mm,
kids, but gosh, there's just so many things going on in this world. What is
Mm,
3 days, 4 days of me building some houses and playing with some kids with soccer and doing some other things? How is that gonna make a dent in anything? I mean,
yeah.
you why would it even go? It doesn't feel like it would do anything in the big scope of what's
Yeah.
going on, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an accurate estimation of decision making, right? So, would it be better for you to take the money that you raised to attend the trip and just send it directly to the organization?
Yeah.
Or do you take the money and use it to have this experience and potentially plant seeds in ways that you couldn't do unless you were in person? I think you do have to evaluate those two things.
Mhm.
Again, I think there's pros and cons with both. I love the idea of the experience for our kids. You cannot learn about poverty from a book. You
Mm,
can't learn about the Dominican culture and how they worship Jesus without being in person. So, this experience is tangible, it's real time, and it really does build relationships when you do it right. So, there is a lot of value of even just 3 days of coming in, serving and partnering with the local leadership, building a relationship or starting a relationship. Social media is great for that now because I'm still connected with all the people that I was able to be in partnership with when I was down there. We're still communicating to this day. They get to see my kids grow. They remember the stories with my kids. So we're able to still maintain that. But we also have to remember that we are not the one that waters the seed and harvests it. Like, God is the one that does that. So being prayerful, if God wants to send you on this trip, being prayerful of recognizing your role on this trip. What is he asking you to do?
mm,
Maybe it's to share the gospel with one person. Maybe it's to work with rebar. And so now at this church building is now going to be established
mm.
for 100 more people to worship the King of Kings. Like, figuring out what God wants you to experience in this trip, that also should inform your next steps.
That's really cool. Paige, this has been great. I mean, just to get a real insight on the trip that you went to, and then
Mhm.
just sharing your heart that people should check it out, or at the least pray about it to see if the
Absolutely.
Lord would lead them in that direction. As we close out today, Paige, is there anything you want to tell our listeners about these short-term mission trips?
Yeah, I would just say connect with your local pastors and ask, what are the mission opportunities? So maybe you can physically go on a trip, or maybe you could support a missionary that is living full time in that culture. Your financial support can help them
Mm,
do and partner and truly be transformational for the community that they're living in. I also want to give a huge shout out to Solid Rock International. They have been phenomenal. This year was the first year that I was able to partner with them in an educational way. In fact, I was able to go to 3 of their schools and talk to over 400 students,
wow.
school counselors, teachers, and administrators about mental health strategies. That was one thing that I learned. In the DR is one thing. They are super passionate people and they love well, but navigating some emotions can be a little bit harder. So I was able to have those conversations, and it was just a wonderful experience. They've asked me to come back to talk to other teachers and parents and potentially other students as the year goes on. So I'd love for you to check out Solid Rock International. In our show notes will be a link to their website, as well as a video that my friend and producer slash director Crystal Went created last year for our DR trip, which gives you a little more insight of the barrio clinics, the evangelism, the school system, and the construction site. So definitely take a moment and check that out in our show notes.
Yes, absolutely. And I saw that video. It's really cool. So, Paige, thanks so much for having me on. We're excited about the upcoming weeks. We have some great interviews coming up. So, listeners, please jump in every Tuesday. We have new shows. So you got to check them out. And if you missed any shows in the past, you got to check them out too. There's so many amazing things that have been happening in 2024, but now 2025 is just going to be incredible. So, Paige, thanks you once again for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's always my pleasure. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Again, subscribe so you don't miss any of the shows coming up. Leave a review. And of course, if you have a question or you would like someone on this show or topic wise, please email me at paigeclingenpeel.com. All right, friends, we will see you next week for another edition of Embracing Your Season.